I didn't. You can keep singing your Bonjour song. All right, we're live. We'll give this. Oh, my hair looks weird. Let's give us a few seconds. Hi, everybody. I'm just gonna wave. We're just gonna give this a couple minutes for people to get the word. That wasn't even intentional. Hi, everybody. I'm George O'Connor. I am the writer and creator of Olympians, and I am here today on Word Bookstore's Instagram. I was here a couple weeks ago and was doing... So let's just talk about what's going on. We know what's happened in the world. We're all experiencing this, especially in this country right now. But Word is, it's two great independent bookstores, one here in Brooklyn and one across the river in Jersey. And like many of the independent bookstores and many of the independent businesses and many businesses, period, it's been hit pretty hard by what's been going on in the world. They're still fulfilling book orders. They're still doing stuff. They have these things like the Homeward Bound mystery box, where you call up and you just give a description of some stuff your friend might like, and they send them a perfect book recommendation and a bunch of gifts like puzzles and games and things to keep them busy. Word's still doing the good stuff, but I'm being hosted today on their Instagram for a little series that I am calling, what am I calling this again? Greek Speak. I couldn't remember if it was Greek Speak or Geek Speaks Greek. They both work. I mean, they're both good. As long as there's geeks, as long as there's Greek, as long as there's speak. It's all, it's me. So I'm just here today. I'm just talking about Greek mythology, doing some drawing, stuff like that. One of the reasons I'm back at Word is one of the things that we're going to be doing, and there'll be more information announced about this in the days to come. Next week, in order to help out Word, I'm going to be doing a course. It'll be I think it's going to be a 3-day course. We're going to be making comics. It'll be a little bit more, this thing I'm doing now is all sort of loosey-goosey. This would be something with like a lesson plan. This would be something with actual educational value, right? And I'm going to be doing this, helping out Word. This will not be broadcast live the same way as this is. This is going to be something that there will be a cost for this. That makes it sound like a blood cost. This will be something people sign up for. There'll be a small enrollment fee that's going to go to Word Bookstore. I'm donating my time to help out this bookstore I love. But if it's something you think you might be interested in, like a comics making course with me, George O'Connor, 3 days intensive, I'm not super intensive, it's still gonna be fun. Just write to us actually here at kids@wordbookstores.com. And like I said, there'll be a lot more detail forthcoming in the days to come. But hello. You know what I forgot? Can you get me my iPad? I totally forgot for showing the drawings. Sorry, I'm a little bit remember I was saying loosey-goosey today? Yeah, did not get prepared for this. We were, moments before this began, we were singing show tunes and such, which that's a fun activity to engage into, but it's not really helpful for doing a podcast about Greek mythology. So if you've joined me for the first time today, we've done other sessions about this. Every day I've come and I've talked about various goddesses or gods. Friday we had our first departure from that format where we talked about the snaky monster Medusa. And before you go talking some bad stuff about Medusa, I was firmly on Team Medusa. And I drew Medusa and I talked about how Medusa is this very misunderstood figure and very maligned. And we drew some pictures and I asked people to send in their drawings of Medusa as well. And I got a bunch of drawings. I'm going to share a few of those with you right up to the start. This is a drawing by a friend of the show, Shiloh. This is his version of Medusa. There's a couple details I want to point out that his mom told me. This over here is an individual who was turned into a statue by Medusa, but it was a long time ago, so their arms broke off. So, yikes, hope they never fix that, because he's going to wake up and be like, hey, didn't I used to have arms? Oh. And then here's Medusa herself, lots of snakes. She's also apparently wearing a necklace that's made of all snakes. Because, it's just like the way you and I always wear necklaces made of human hair. It's just the way we do these things, right? Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. This is really, this is definitely my, most loosey-goosey, one would say not really organized at all show. here we have another picture. This is one, oh, it's little, but you can see it. Look at this amazing Medusa. Look at the hands. I mean, yeah, like actually raise your hands like, like that's, first off, that's like a really good drawing. And the hands, if you look closely, they almost look snaky, and then the hair looks snaky and everything. This is amazing. This drawing is from, who is this drawing from? This drawing is from Misha. Misha says, my mom forgot to send me this drawing. Misha, don't worry. She got into us now. What else do we have here? We have, here's a bunch of pictures. Okay. Here's a Poseidon. You could tell it's Poseidon because, I mean, there's the trident. Here we have, oops. Not even sure. I think this is maybe, this is a, an Aphrodite. I should have looked at these descriptions before. And, oh, look at this Medusa. That's in watercolor. That's an awesome painting. Like, that's great. Look at that. And, I mean, watercolors are great medium to do because the snakes are super fun to paint that way. And, oh, and here we have another Medusa. You could look at the snake hair. That's so cool. Those drawings came to us from Eleanor and Parent. Eleanor and their mom did that together. So well done. Let's do one more picture here. Oh, we just got one in. Let's hope it's good because I haven't checked this one out first. Oh no, it didn't load. So, wow, guys, this is a real train wreck today. Sorry about this. I don't think, nope, I think, you know what? We're just gonna move on from this. Sorry about that, everybody. Woo! Can you see me sweating? Can you? Yeah, might fix my hair again. So, hi! That's the beginning of the show. Luckily, this isn't all we're going to be doing. Keep sending your drawings in. You could send them either to, probably the best way to get it, because I get it easiest, is at georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. But you can also send it in to kids@wordbookstores.com. And, yeah, so thank you so much. Today, though, we started off, last week, we talked about the misunderstood character of Medusa. And I had so much fun talking about someone who is so misunderstood that I figured I would continue that even further today by talking about my personal favorite goddess, who I think is more misunderstood and more maligned than even Medusa. And who I'm talking about is Hera. And now, a lot of times people will be surprised. They're like, wait, why do you like Hera? Because so many myths will cast Hera as this petty, vindictive, shrewish goddess. But the whole thing is man, Hera has the worst husband who's ever lived. She's the way she is because she married Zeus. And you could just take a look at any of the family trees in any of my books and see how all those different lines go back to Zeus. Zeus has kids with 11 zillion other ladies besides his wife. That makes him a bad husband. There's a lot of reasons he's a bad husband. He ate his first wife. You eat a wife, you're a bad husband, right? Hera, so I have this, I'll get a little personal here talking about why I like Hera so much. For one thing, I've always been into underdogs. If there's a character who is kind of who's a little bit cranky or a little bit mean or the other people don't like as much, I always like them because I think that's probably very much how I feel a lot of the times. Probably how a lot of us feel. You know, so somebody who's oh, Hera's a bit of a jerk. I'm oh, no, I understand why Hera is a jerk. When I first started working on the Olympian series, I moved overseas for a little bit. And I would travel all around the Mediterranean area, all the places where people used to believe in the gods and goddesses. And I would visit all the different museums and old temples and towns and ruins, anything I could find that was related to this, right? And something I started noticing once you really stepped in this, when you're really seeing a lot of these things, I would go to a town and, there'd be a bunch of old temples in this town. And almost always the oldest temple, the first temple built, would have been for Hera. And then in a lot of those towns, even weirder, the second oldest temple would also have been built to Hera. So they would have built 2 temples to Hera before they built any temples to like any other gods. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. She must have been very, very important. And she was. Like, that's the thing. Like, in antiquity, Hera was this super important goddess. In some instances, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that she was more important than Zeus. And at some point in antiquity, it kind of switches where people start, you know, Zeus becomes the high and mighty and people start kind of picking on Hera and they side with Zeus even though he's clearly the guy who's doing stuff in the wrong. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me. And seeing all the art, and especially the really old art, like she had this incredible, there was all this importance to her that had kind of gotten forgotten. A lot of times when we talk about the gods, we kind of, especially nowadays, we kind of like, we reduce them to really simple concepts. Like when people are like, Hermes is the messenger god. I'm like, sure, he was the messenger god, but he was the god of 11 zillion other things too. Hera, like she was like really, really important. She was the goddess, she's the queen of the gods. She's the goddess among all goddesses. And like, I dislike her for that. I feel like she needs more respect. Allow me to talk to you and try to show you why Hera deserves respect. Now, Hera, I have 2 separate designs for her in my book, so I'm going to draw the first one. She is the goddess of many things, like most of them are. But the most principal thing she is the goddess of is the goddess of marriage. And I draw Hera in 2 different ways, pre-marriage and post-marriage. Let me draw her pre-marriage first. This is Hera right after. We've talked about this in some of the other videos. And if you don't know this story, you can go and watch my videos on my YouTube channel. I've archived them all there. It's George Olympians. Or, you know, I'll probably end up talking about these another one. Hera is the youngest of the initial goddesses. There's the first generation of Olympians. She is the youngest. Hestia was the first goddess. Then there was Demeter. And then Hera is the baby, right? Now, I'm drawing her. She's actually looking kind of pleasant here, right? She's very beautiful. And I'm hoping what I'm conveying with this drawing is a sense of relaxation. Hera doesn't have a lot to worry about yet. This is her immediately after being vomited up by Kronos. I know that's a weird statement. You can explain it to your parents later. Their dad ate them. She grows up inside of this void inside of her father. And Zeus, who is the baby of the entire Olympian family, the first generation, he confronts their dad, the Titan Kronos, and he gives him this this herb that makes Kronos vomit. And when he throws up, which is like, ew, like all his brothers and sisters come out, including Hera. And when Hera first comes out, she's not yet the goddess of marriage. They're just trying to find things out. Some of the other things that she's a goddess of, and these are lesser known, but these go back to ancient times, and this one is really fascinating to me. She was the god of, like, air, like the atmosphere. So Zeus is like the god of the sky. We all know that, right? But she was like the god of the stuff that fills the sky. And they've always been very linked. Like, they're both the youngest. She's the youngest goddess. He's the youngest god, right? And, of course, they were linked in marriage eventually. But it's like their powers work in tandem. There's even myths where she brandishes a lightning bolt. So she's almost, think of her, like, on a power level, she's very much equal with Zeus. If this was a color piece, I would draw her eyes blue, because just like Zeus, who is a god of the sky, because she's the god of the atmosphere, her eyes, I always color the exact same color as the sky. So this is Hera before, and she spends a few hundred years just being cool and calm and not having to worry, and that entire time, Zeus is pursuing her. And Zeus tends to get what he wants. It's a really weird story, the story where they finally, it involves, I'll show you, some of it's on my cover. Zeus basically becomes a bird, and he tricks her into marrying him in a way. It's not a story that makes a lot of sense. It's a story that's kind of fun to tell, but it's a little bit long here. And then Hera marries him. She becomes the queen of the gods. And once Hera gets married, I draw her looking very different. Let me just push this down. There. Because now we get to work some of the symbolism of her role. And this is not my attitude in all marriage, but this is the attitude that we see in Hera's marriage. So Hera has to take, let's be honest, she's the grown-up in this relationship. Zeus, although he is the king of the gods, he's not very committed to this relationship. He's always running around having kids with other goddesses and nymphs and humans and probably owls and whatever else. That would be a good picture to draw. If you want to draw what the son or daughter of Zeus and an owl would look like, I would love to see that. So put that on my list. So same face, she's still very beautiful, but her smile, it's a little bit tighter. It's a subtle thing, but it's there. She has amazing cheekbones and chins. They all do. Now we can see her ears very clearly, because when Hera is married, in my design of her, she wears her hair tied back tight into this little bun. And we can really see her long, beautiful neck. Her hair would be black. I'm not going to color it all in because that would take a long time, but... And there's a lot of symbolism going into this. For Hera, unfortunately, her marriage is something that traps her a bit. We'll get back to that later. Like I said, this is my attitude towards all marriage. This is the attitude towards her relationship with Zeus, right? And so the hair being tied back, is to symbolize the fact that she's very restrained in this. When we see her first, when she's a younger goddess, and she can run free, she just wears her hair down, and she just seems like a more relaxed and happy person. And when she is the goddess, she has to maintain this air of dignity. She's regal. She's regal as heck. She's like, and she's the one, she has to carry the decorum of the throne. Zeus, I mean, you look at old statues of him, the guy doesn't even wear clothes. He runs around naked all the time, throwing lightning bolts at people. That's not dignified. She's the one who has to carry all the dignity, right? And she also has to kind of make sure the show runs, because Zeus is running around throwing lightning bolts at people with no clothes on. One of her symbols, all of the gods have different symbols, different animals, things like that. One of her symbols was the peacock. It's probably her most well-known symbol. And part of that is reflected in my design of her. If you've watched other videos, you know there's always a few clues in the way the goddess or god, some element of them in their design. Hera, her little bow, her bun, looks like that little antenna thing that peacocks have in the back of their head. And her long neck is like the long neck of a peacock. She actually has like the head, in a sense, of a peacock. And that was something I did on purpose. Some of my early designs of her, she had like weird peacock, like boa around her. That just was a little bit too much. She was like, come on, she's supposed to be dignified. So, now I talked about how the marriage can be a very constraining thing for Hera. And one of the myths about her that I did in my research, especially with traveling around, that I found was really interesting. Well, it's funny, I say it's a myth. It's a myth we don't really have. And what I mean is we have elements of this myth recorded. We know places where this myth would occur. Here's what it was. Have you ever heard of Pausanias? He was a Greek historian. He traveled around the ancient world, and he would write about all the stuff that he would see. This is back in the day, but like he was still, I mean, you know, people worship the gods for a really long time. So some of the stuff he'd come across from, even though from our point of view, he was incredibly ancient, they would see things that were really old. And he would record in several different places that there would be a festival for Hera, where it was a giant festival, where for one day a year, she left Zeus. She was able to just take her relationship, and she was like, you know what, Zeus? I can't take this anymore. And she would let her hair down, and she would go into whatever the local body of water, be it a river or a lake or whatever, something that had an attached importance to her, and she would wash away her marriage, metaphorically speaking. And then she would be reborn as the unmarried Hera. It would be like she was like back, just for that one day, she was able to return to this state when she was just relaxed, and she didn't have all these responsibilities and all these things that tied her into this relationship with Zeus. And I mean, obviously this was something, like, you can't really do that for one day, but it was just a festival. And it was a festival that was held throughout different spots in Greece. And there was myths attached to it, but we don't have a lot of that stuff that survived to us anymore. And the reason why, honestly, is most of the myths that we have written down that we know were myths that men told. And they would write down the stories that the men told. But the women had a whole bunch of other myths that we didn't really get to read. We don't get to hear them because the women, if they did write them down, we don't know where they are. Those stories haven't gotten through to us yet. And I think, to bring this all together, I think that's one of the reasons why we have this kind of bad view of Hera now. Because the stories they get to her, some of the oldest stuff we have, like Homer, he's pretty awful in the way he describes her. And we know that there's these older myths where she's the hero, she's the good guy. And it's just these guys would tell these stories, they'd forget these ones. Couple of things to talk about. Like, we think of the gods and goddesses who sponsor heroes. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. First and foremost, there's Athena. She sponsors, like, so many of the heroes. She's always looking out for them. And she's often accompanied by Hermes. But actually, Hera is a pretty big sponsor of heroes. Y'all have heard of Jason, right? Jason and the Argonauts? That was Hera's guy. She's the one who kind of takes the role where she sets him on his quest, and she watches over him as he goes on the quest for the Golden Fleece and his later adventures too. That was all Hera's doing. And what's really fascinating to me, and we're going to talk about this guy in greater depth on Wednesday, is her relationship with Heracles, who you might know as Hercules. But Heracles, who is not the son of Hera, but is the son of Zeus, has this very complicated relationship with her. His name, spoilers, means the glory of Hera. So already that's like interesting, right? But one of the myths that I think is so fascinating about Heracles, because in a lot of stories, she's the straight up bad guy. Sometimes she even kills his family, which is like pretty low, even for like when you're showing Hera being the bad person. But one of the oldest myths I could find about Hera, and it's a myth that explains why Heracles was so much stronger than the other demigod kids of Zeus. When he's a baby, he was left to be exposed on a mountainside to die. And he's rescued, and he's brought to Hera, and Hera breastfeeds him. And he's this baby, and when her milk is going into him, he's made more powerful. He's already pretty powerful. He's the son of Zeus, right? But an immortal woman. And this milk flows into him and makes him more and more strong. And he sucks so strong, when she finally pulls the baby away, there's a spray. And that spray creates the Milky Way. Did you know that that's what the Milky Way galaxy is named after? It's from Hera, and I mean, it's pretty weird. Just like, it's a weird story. But like she's responsible for like him having these great powers. And she's like, if she hates him so much, she saves his life as a baby. That's fascinating to me. So we'll get into that sort of stuff. There's these threads, like these stories were told for thousands of years. And sometimes the last stories that were told are the ones that we know best. And in the case of Hera, in a lot of those cases, I think the last stories were told by, frankly, sexist people. So we end up hearing bad versions of Hera, and I think Hera is pretty awesome. Anything else I should mention about Hera? I mentioned she's the goddess of marriage. She's also the goddess of childbirth. We've talked about this in other episodes. There's a lot of gods of childbirth, but like I kind of said, like that makes sense because childbirth is one of the most important things that could happen, right? It's like literally a new person. So, and she has children of her own with Zeus. She has Ares. In most versions, Hephaestus. So there's some versions where she has Hephaestus by herself, but those are weird. We don't like those stories. There is her daughter by Zeus, Hebe, who is the cupbearer of the gods. And then there is sometimes a fourth child, Eileithyia. And she doesn't really appear in myth. She doesn't really have a personality. And in fact, sometimes you would see, like in cult, when people would worship Hera, they would call her Hera Eileithyia. Eileithyia is the goddess of childbirth, and it's an aspect of Hera. And in my books, I'm like, that's just her job. But sometimes you will see her like on vase paintings as a separate being. But that's weird. That stuff gets into. We'll talk more about that. And I think that's a pretty good oversight of Hera. Personally, I mean, I'm just saying like all the stuff why she was treated bad. The reason I like Hera, I like her because she gets stuff done. And like I said, I associate with the people who are underdogs. And Hera is probably the first of the characters, besides maybe Hermes, when I was working in Olympians, who started writing themselves. You've maybe heard writers talk about this, where when you know a character really well or you figure out a character, sometimes you intend for them to do something, but as you're writing, they just do something different. Like you're in the zone, you're typing or drawing, whatever you do. And Hera would just start talking in a way that I didn't intend her to at first. And that makes so much sense when you think about Hera, because Hera is like not arguably, I'd say like in terms of physical might, she's the most powerful goddess. She puts up with a lot. And she's probably, I'd put her at smartest after Hermes and Athena. She's probably the smartest. She's very cagey. And like people like to focus on these negative qualities, but for me, I think she's had to deal with so much. And I like that she kind of asserted herself in my stories that way. And she ends up having kind of a wry sense of humor, which I didn't intend. And And something that I picked up in myth and I've really enjoyed is the way that she eventually forms a friendship with Athena. Athena is another child of Zeus by another woman, and you would think they wouldn't get along. But over the course of several myths, several stories, several of my books, they find that they have common goals to work towards, common enemies to destroy. And they develop an appreciation. I don't think they would hang out necessarily and get massages together or something, but I think that they enjoy each other's personalities in a funny way. Maybe they're a little wary of each other, but I enjoy that. And like those characters really came to life for me in a way that was really eye-opening, and I really loved it. So that's why I love Hera. I hope you appreciate Hera. I hope you will draw a Hera. Maybe you post, the more familiar image of Hera, where she is the goddess of marriage, queen of the gods. Maybe young Hera, where she gets to wander around and just, see the earth and do things and not have to worry about everything. Maybe draw your own version of Hera. I would just love to send you your drawings, please, at either kids@wordbookstores.com or georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. So now's the part of the day where I like to throw it open for Q&A, for questions. This is your chance if you've ever read any of my books, or even if you've never read any of my books. Just be like, hey, I have a question about this or about that. And have we gotten any questions yet already?
I have one.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Hera had a favorite child, who would it be?
Ooh, wait, okay.
It doesn't have to be her biological child.
Yeah,
if she had a favorite child.
I was going to be my follow-up question. If Hera had a favorite child, and it doesn't have to be one of her actual 3/4 biological children, who would that child be? That's interesting. So, Hera doesn't seem to like Ares, which is okay, because nobody seems to like Ares. I feel bad for Ares. We talk about this a lot. Ares gets a bad rap. Maybe deserving so. Hephaestus is probably her favorite, but she's awful to him. Like, when he was a baby, that's a whole story. We'll get into it when I talk about Hephaestus tomorrow. She threw Hephaestus off Mount Olympus as a baby. So that's not a nice way to treat him. And if that's their best kid, that's pretty messed up. Hebe, she just treats Hebe kind of like as a waitress, right? But she does, and then there's other goddesses, and like she doesn't seem to like Apollo and Artemis at all, not her kids. There's a pretty cool scene in Ares, actually, where she beats up Artemis, where she takes her bow and smashes it over her head. It was a fun thing to draw. She doesn't seem to like Heracles that much, although they do seem to come to a mutual understanding at some point. There was a scene I put in Hermes, where when Hermes is born, and this comes from the Homeric hymn to Hermes. He's born as a super intelligent baby. He's so smart. He's already like arguably the smartest god as a baby. He's so smart he knows to hide his intelligence. So he pretends to be a baby, like who's just like a gaga goo goo poop his pants baby. But he goes out and like wreaks havoc and basically spends all his time punking his older brother Apollo, who is like not the smartest god. And Apollo's like losing it. And as I mentioned, Hera doesn't really like Apollo for various reasons. And when basically it all comes to a head where Apollo literally chases this little baby to Mount Olympus because Hermes is already super fast. And he races into his dad Zeus's arms. First time he meets his dad, and he's like, Daddy, save me from the big scary man. And like that should be something Hera should be like, oh my god, another baby. But because this baby appears and is really funny and charming and is making life difficult for a god who I think she really dislikes, I think Hera would probably like Hermes the best out of those kids. That might be just kind of me, because like, I'll be honest, Hermes is my favorite god, Hera's my favorite goddess. I have maybe a vested interest in liking each other. But it makes a lot of sense to me, personality-wise, that they get, and you see in the myths, they get along pretty well, as far as people who aren't always working at the same ends. Do we have any other questions?
These next three go together.
Okay, we have three parts.
Hand.
All right.
Are there any stories in which Hera cheats on Zeus?
Are there any stories in which Hera cheats on Zeus? So I mentioned the Pausanias story where he records that there's a myth that we don't really know where he leaves. I have a theory. This is my own speculation. This is based on my own independent research. I'm going to lay this out. This is like do we have a tinfoil hat for me to put on? Because this is conspiracy theory stuff. So we know Hera leaves Zeus at one point. One time a year, as a matter of fact. Hera has the guardsman Argus. I've maybe talked about Argus. Maybe I should draw him really quickly. Argus Panoptus is a giant. He's got these big, thick eyebrows. He's got these big eyes. Here's his nose. Oh, here's his other eye. Oh, wait, what? Here's his mustache. Here's his mouth. Oh, here's another eye. Wait, what? What? Here's another eye over here. He's got a beard. There's an eye in this beard. Maybe put another eye over here. Okay. Clearly, Argus is a weird-looking dude. Argus Panoptus, which means Argus, like, with all the eyes. He had 100 eyes. These 100 eyes would allow him to be the perfect watchman. He would never actually go to sleep. There would always be at least 50 eyes awake at any time. He was incredibly devoted to Hera, right? Hera sets him to watch over Io, the cow. That's a whole story. Basically, Zeus was having an affair with this mortal princess. Hera catches them, turns Io into a cow, and is like, oh, this is your pet cow. Hera knows what's going on, and she doesn't want Zeus to be able to rescue this lady, so she gets trapped as a cow, and she makes a guy who never sleeps watch over it. During the course of, like, the myths, Hermes eventually frees Io, but in doing so, kills Argus, the most devoted follower to Hera. So, remember I talked about how she's a hero sponsor of Jason? Jason the Argonauts. Do you hear the name Argonauts? They're called Argonauts because she tells him to build a boat. And she tells him to name the boat the Argo. Like, the Argus. I think, this is just my theory, I think the reason why Hermes killed him at Zeus's bequest is because there is a thread of story somewhere where he is a lover of Hera, where Hera has feelings for him. Zeus is very jealous. And it's not, he doesn't kill, because Hermes doesn't really need to kill him. It's a weird thing in the story. Hermes puts him to sleep and then cuts his head off. It's like, what? Why? And Hermes not really bloodthirsty, right? So I think it's, and she loved him enough that when she had her hero named a boat, it was named after this guy. This, again, this is my own theory. I can't really find the stuff, but I think, yeah, I feel like there's probably a story out there somewhere. In my personal headcanon, weirdly, I ship these two. Now this is... wait, ship it! Like Argo, oh my god. Like, just everyone's like, oh, we're gonna turn this off now, click.
If Hera would ever marry someone other than Zeus, who would she marry?
Ah, so that brings it around to this was a three-part question. If Hera would ever marry somebody else other than Zeus, who would she marry? I mean, maybe Argus. I mean, like I laid out for reasons, I feel like there's a reason. I feel like they have a connection there. Weirdly, temperamentally wise, I feel like she would be a better match for Hades than she is for Zeus. Because she is the goddess of marriage, and Hades is a far more faithful spouse. Out of the three brothers of that initial generation, he's got Persephone, and there's like, there's Mentha, and that's like a weird side myth thing. For the most part, it's just Persephone, right? But like Zeus, it's like Zeus and a million other women, and Poseidon, Zeus and a million other women. Like, I feel like, also, like, they're kind of the most, they're like very like sober and serious in many ways. I feel like that would be a good match for her.
Does Hera have children with anybody other than Zeus?
So, and then the follow-up question to that, does Hera have children with anybody other than Zeus? No. At least not that we know of. There might be some sort of side myths out there, something. In fact, if somebody knows, and I'm just forgetting, or I just don't know this story, let me know. But I think, like, the idea of the goddess of marriage having children outside of her marriage, even though the father could, like Zeus, he's not the god of marriage, he's just, creep. I feel like that would so uproot the idea of like what the Greek world was going for. They couldn't allow that to happen.
Would Hera ever start a war against anyone?
Would Hera ever start a war against anyone? So, Hera moves in power. In the Judgment of Paris, which is this event which led to the Trojan War, basically the three most powerful goddesses are set against each other. And they go to this guy Paris, not the city. He was like a Trojan prince in disguise. He had to choose who was the most beautiful of them. It's really a power struggle. It's who's the most powerful. And they all kind of bribe him. They all offer him gifts. And Athena, as the goddess of war, she's like, I'll make you invincible in battle. You could take over any place you want. That's definitely like a war-type gift, right? Aphrodite gives him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, like mortal, not Aphrodite herself or any of the goddesses. That's the one that wins. But what Hera offers, she's like, I'll give you Asia. You know, the entire continent of Asia, the most populous continent in the world, largest landmass? I'll give you that. So that's not really a war thing, but you have to imagine, like, would she have to, like, start a war to start that? Or could she just, in her power, just be like, Thanos snap, boom, you have like, Asia? I don't know. I feel like she's weird. So she's a weird mix of being very subtle. She's almost maybe the best goddess at laying, like, kind of weird traps. Maybe best god, period. But she's also, like, very direct in some ways. I don't think she would engineer a whole war, but I could see her doing that. That was a great question. Thank you, whoever that was.
Did Zeus and Hera's standing as the most powerful, but also the youngest, influence Greek society? Did they see the youngest siblings as stronger?
Ooh, wow. Okay, that's a great question. I don't know if you heard it. I'm going to repeat it. Did the fact that the two youngest siblings of the goddess and gods of the first generation, Hera and Zeus, that they were arguably the most powerful, was that a reflection of Greek society? Did Greek society somehow view the youngest siblings? You know, a lot of times, like, you see, like, power and deeds and property are passed to the eldest siblings. But it was somehow the fact that they were the youngest siblings indicative of a trend in Greek society where it was the youngest that were most venerated. I don't think so, but that's a fascinating question. Because it is interesting, right? I have mined a lot of very interesting story mileage out of the fact, especially for Poseidon, who clearly seems to have some problems with his brother's ruling of the universe, where he's the middle child and he's very resentful of his younger brother. Doesn't seem to have any problems with his older brother, Hades. And if you watch my Hades episode, you know I make the case where Hades is actually the best set up because they're all immortal. They just have nothing but time. And eventually everything's going to be Hades because he's the god of the dead. But that is a fascinating idea that it's the youngest child. I don't know. If anybody out there is like, if there are any classics majors out there who are like, you know more about this than me, please let me know because I would love to know that answer.
Did Zeus ever try to kick Hera out of Olympus?
Yeah, there's a myth. Excuse me one second. The question is, did Zeus ever try to kick Hera out of Olympus? And I'm going to reverse it to say, and there's a myth I've mentioned, I think, almost every episode. There's also a myth where Hera overthrows Zeus. The myth of where Hera overthrows Zeus, I retell it in my Poseidon book. Poseidon, Athena, and Hera just straight up overthrow Zeus. They chain him up in chains of adamantine. And the only way that he's not completely overthrown forever is that he enlists the aid of one of the Hecatoncheires. They're the Olympians' uncles. There's these monsters with 50 heads and 100 hands. And that frees him. But there is a myth that's retold briefly in... Oh, man, it's Homer. I don't remember if it's the Odyssey or the Iliad. I think it's the Iliad, where there's a story where Homer, he doesn't kick her out of Olympus, but he punishes her. And he punishes her by, he chains her hands and suspends her from the sky. And then, let me fix my belly, and he chains anvils to her feet and suspends her there. I hate this story. I just don't like it. It's. Remember how I was saying up front, one of the problems I have with tellings of Hera, especially once Homer gets in there, is they smack of sexism. This story smacks of sexism. And in the actual book, it's told by Zeus himself. So I'm like, Zeus, how reliable are you? Because we know that Hera is his equal on power. And I'm just like, this whole story, I don't like it. So yeah, there's that one.
So it seems Hera hardly likes anyone. Did she become mean and uptight? I want to like her, but...
Yeah, my take on Hera, the question is, it seems Hera doesn't play well with others. And she doesn't like anyone. Did she become mean and tight? I want to like her, but... which I guess somebody used emojis to ask. But, yeah, I honestly think that Hera is someone who has been... my take on Hera, if you look at my notes where I wrote her, is I think Hera, out of the original three goddesses, is... being Hestia, Demeter, and herself, is actually the most empathetic and nice of them. And in fact, you could see a trace of this in this, I mentioned briefly how when she married Zeus, it was because he tricked her by pretending to be a bird. He becomes a sad little bird, a pathetic little bird, and flies up to her windowsill. And this is after years of trying to get her married otherwise. And she sees this poor bird and thinks it's injured, sick, and dying. And she takes the bird in. She has a soft heart. She's a big heart. And Zeus gets into that heart and makes her hard and callous. And turns her from this into this. So if we were to go through Olympus, like look at the big gods and look at their relationships, it suddenly makes sense why she's so adversarial. Let's start with Hestia. Not really much of a personality. We can't really say much about Hestia. I think Hestia and her, whatever. Hades, already expressed how I think her and Hades would actually be a good couple. Thing is, Hades isn't on Olympus. He really never goes back to Olympus ever again. He's not even Olympian. Demeter. Now, you could argue that they're close friends. Demeter had a kid by Zeus named Persephone. So, okay, you had a kid with my sister. That's going to cause some problems with me and my sister, right? Poseidon, well, he's fights with her. Actually, her and Poseidon, there's evidence that they do get along because they did overthrow Zeus. So maybe her and Poseidon get along. Poseidon, I'd say, is worse than her in the category of doesn't get along with anybody. Like, I don't think Poseidon gets along with any gods at all. Like, anyone. Then we have herself. Well, we can't. Zeus, adversarial relationship with him. We look at Zeus's children, the second generation. Athena is the kid by another woman, so there's a problem. Leto and Apollo are the daughters of... Artemis and Apollo are the daughters of Leto. She's straight up... Like, Zeus is straight up having an affair with Leto while Hera is pregnant with Hephaestus. That's a problem. Then Ares comes out. He's a psychopath, so your kid's a psychopath. You probably love him, but you're like, don't leave the kitchen knives out near him. Hephaestus, she's not nice to Hephaestus, but she kind of is nice. I don't know. Hephaestus does whatever she wants. It's kind of sad. We'll talk about that on like Wednesday or tomorrow. Hermes, like I said, she kind of seems to actually enjoy Hermes, but again, another mom there. Dionysus, she definitely doesn't like Dionysus, another mom. She's this mean character because she's literally surrounded by enemies and betrayals. But you could see her true nature come out when she's helping someone she really wants to help. Jason, baby Heracles. There's some things she does that are good. I think it's just that she has to keep up a guard all the time.
So do you think that she stays with Zeus because she really loves him or because she's the goddess of marriage?
So a question off camera. Do I think she stays with Zeus because she really loves him or simply because she is the goddess of marriage? We're getting into some heavy discussions here. Here's the question. Is it because she's the goddess of marriage or because she's the queen of the gods and she's at the seat of power of all the universe? I think that might be the reason. It would be a bad scene, I guess, if the goddess of marriage got a divorce. But I think it's because she gets to be the goddess of everything. Where else can she go? I guess she could retire. I mean, she seems to own Asia, so maybe she'll just go hang out there. I don't know.
Do Hera and Persephone get along?
Question is, do Hera and Persephone get along? Honestly, can't think of a myth where they interact. So, the way I write Demeter and Hera is they do mostly get along. There is this huge bump in their relationship that Demeter had a kid with Hera's husband. Some accountings of myths place that before Hera and Zeus got together. I actually leave it kind of ambiguous in my books. I can't decide because I kind of like that it happened beforehand, but then that means like Persephone is older than almost all the other second generation Olympians, and that doesn't strike me right. So I just left it vague on purpose. I feel like they just wouldn't have much to do with each other. There's not a lot of overlap in the things that they're in charge of. I'll talk about this more as I talk about Persephone, but Persephone is very much a character that needs to be viewed in tandem with her mother Demeter. They're kind of like, in some ways, the same goddess at different times of life. The same way, like, there's Hera is these two versions. You could almost think of, like, Persephone is the young Demeter, and then Demeter is the older Demeter. So there's a real link between those two. I feel like, yeah, I can't imagine, I don't know how they would get to it. Like, I would love to see somebody else's theories on this. Like, maybe some fanfic about the two of them.
So someone else asked, what was the relationship between Hera, Hestia, and Demeter? Is there any interaction with them at all?
So the question is, what is the relationship between Hera, Hestia, and Demeter? Some of this is my examples of my own storytelling. Some of the stuff is things you're going to see in the 12th and final book, Dionysus. Hestia came first, and so that placed her in a little bit of a caretaker position over her other siblings. You know, they're all swallowed as babies, infants, helpless, into their father's stomach, Kronos. Hestia, as there is the longest, she kind of has almost like a surrogate mother attitude towards them, where she looks over them. But something that we've talked about in the Hestia episode, you can go back and see it, she's not as personified as the other gods and goddesses. So I feel like she's a bit, even ironically for the goddess of fire, I think emotionally she's a little bit distant and cool. And so, like, there's this thing where she kind of, like, I think the gods have great affection for her, but, like, she's not someone that they could go hang out with, per se. If you look in my series, when you see shots, especially when there's a scene set when it's young Hera, you see her and Demeter are together almost always. And I think that they do have a friendship. And, but I think as they have gotten older, the thing about being in charge of stuff, and you'll understand this if you're ever put in charge of things, is it actually weirdly being the boss puts a lot of limitations on you. Because you have so many things that you have to answer to. If you're a true leader, you answer to the things that you're in charge of, the people you're in charge of, right? So Demeter is very wrapped up in her job of making things grow. And I think Hera's very wrapped up in her job of being the queen of everything. So I think they probably still get together sometimes. Honestly, I think Hera probably is like, now she's like, I think Demeter needs to take a chill pill. She's like back off and give your daughter some room. Like, I think, like, in recent years, they probably don't hang out as much as they did.
Who is Hera's least favorite child of Zeus's with any woman?
Hera's least favorite child of Zeus's with any other mother. So, tempted to say it's Apollo or Artemis. In fact, it's probably Apollo. Let me just think if there's anyone else I can think of. Oh, I mean, you could argue Heracles, depending on the version. She seems to hate Heracles a lot in some versions. It's not the versions I necessarily told, but, I mean, she straight up tries to kill him as a baby. But as far as, like, I think the big gods on Olympus, there's a bit you can actually read it in, in my book Artemis, where there's a little bit of the story told from her point of view. And it outlines the fact that she views them, and I think you could really look at myth and see that this is the way it works, is there's a weird little clique within the Olympians, where Apollo and Artemis are this little team, and they hang out with their mom Leto, who's like not a big Olympian, but she's around, and they're kind of this weird little family within the family structure. And I think the other gods, to whatever degrees, either try to assimilate into the larger group of the family or have no choice. Like, they don't have another parental figure there. They're just like, Zeus, pay attention to me. And I think the fact that they've maintained this autonomy makes Hera feel very resentful of them.
We have a few questions that are not specifically Hera.
All right, so we're moving to some non-Hera specific questions.
Why do we have so many surviving Greek myths?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Why do we have so many surviving Greek myths? That is an excellent question, because if you've heard me talk about other ones, I've spoken at length about how my next series is going to be about Norse mythology. And Norse mythology, there's not a lot of surviving stuff. It's very frustrating. Greek, we have an incredible amount. But what's even stranger about Greek mythology is, as much as we have, we still don't have most of it, I'd say. And the reason why we have so much is because, historians could contradict me. There's a lot of different things. For one thing, the Greeks and then the Romans after them and concurrent with them were enormous empires who had enormous effect on particularly Western civilization. The civilization we're part of is derived largely from emulation and a direct lineage from them. So these writings, it became a status of like higher learning to understand these stories. It was valued by like the more educated classes. So even though people by and large stopped believing in these gods and goddesses, these myths had a weight to them because the Greeks invented so many different things, both literarily and scientifically and mathematically. So there was always this great importance attached to these stories. So they survived they survived a lot of culls that would have happened otherwise, where a lot of times when a new power takes over, they destroy stuff on purpose. People would try to save these things. Tons of it still got destroyed. Some of it just got lost. Sometimes we find stuff like that's been lost for years. But I think it's because, and especially I think the Romans did a good job of preserving a lot of this stuff. So we have a lot more of this that lasts than we would have otherwise. But there's also this, there was so much of it written down. It's just, you know, like some cultures, they just never get a chance to write as much stuff, and they don't have as many people, and they're not around for as many years. There's just, it all came together, and then the fact that it still speaks to us so strongly, I think means that it's just lasted in a way that very few other things do.
What do you think the Titans do while imprisoned?
Okay, the question, what do I think the Titans do while imprisoned? So after Zeus freed his brothers and sisters from his father Kronos with the throw-up drug and everything, the gods, the first 6 Olympians, and they teamed up with the Hecatoncres and the Cyclopes, and they fought with the Titans for like years, and it was called the Titanomachy, or the Clash of the Titans, not like the movie. And there was this giant battle, and at the end of it, the gods, the Olympians, were victorious, and they imprisoned the Titans underground in Tartarus. And the question is, what do I think they do down there? Well, I've drawn them a few times, and whenever I draw them, they're just shaking the bars. And there are accounts at different spots, like where there was volcanic activity or like seismic activity in ancient Greece, where people would actually credit that as being because there was a Titan that was entombed beneath. So I think they probably did stuff beyond that. I think it's probably safe to say the Titans were really good at poker. They probably invented before anybody else. Several of them were actually really good breakdancers. People don't realize that. So they would put out some cardboard and they'd do some like pop and locks and some spins and things. At least one of them was a gifted mime, and he'd be like, "Look, I'm trapped in a box." They're like, "That's not funny. We're all trapped in a box." So I think that's what happened.
So the big one.
The big one. Is this the last question?
Yes.
All right, the final question, and it's a big one.
What's your opinion on why hope was the last thing left in Pandora's box?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Got to do some explaining. All right. We all know the story of Pandora, right? Some versions, she's the first woman. That makes no sense. I like the idea she's just a woman created by Hephaestus, gifted gifts and attributes by all the gods. That's what her name means, all the gifts. And she was sent as this kind of, if you permit me to mix up my myths here, a bit of a Trojan horse for the human race. She's gifted first, maybe, to Prometheus, the Titan of forethought, who he could look ahead and he's like, no, I could see what's going on here. Instead, his brother Epimetheus, the god of afterthought, like looking back like, that was dumb. He takes this beautiful, exquisite, amazing, incredible woman as his bride. And she's like, look, I have this pithos, which is a type of jar, not a box. And he's like, wow, what's in that? She's like, wouldn't you like to know? And depending on the version of the story, sometimes she opens it, but she's not opening it. It's definitely Epimetheus. The dude's name is Afterthought. He's all about regrets. I actually drew the two of them opening up together. They open this. And there's various different versions of this story that are recorded, right? And all the evils of the world are spread out. You know, plagues, disease, or maybe in some versions like greed, avarice, runny noses, whatever it is. These things are all let loose from here, right? But hope remains, right? And there's very different interpretations of this. Like, is that a good thing that hope remains? Is the fact that they held on to hope mean that we could still have hope? Or is the fact that hope is still in the pithos, in the jar, does that mean we can't have hope because it's still trapped? That kind of makes sense, right? Because like the rest of the stuff got out in the world, that's why it causes these problems. But if hope's in a jar, that means nobody can have hope? I don't know. That seems a little bit bleak. And I in my book Hephaestus, I actually have Hermes kind of wonder about that. He's talking to Prometheus. He's like, yeah, what is that about, right? And he's definitely playing the devil's advocate in there. Like, that's probably about the most sinister Hermes ever gets in those books. He's, like, literally gloating over the bound form of Prometheus, this guy who only tried to help humankind. But because Prometheus knows things that Zeus doesn't want him to know, or rather, Zeus wants to know himself, he's bound and tortured for, like, the longest time. And it's like Hermes is right there being like, go on, tell me. So, I think, personally, the intent was to show that we still have hope within us. But I have to admit, the way that it's still entombed in that pathos makes it almost seem like hope is a bit of a futile gesture. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing. I think we should have hope. I think there is hope. And then we have to stop here because Instagram cuts us off after an hour. So I'm going to stop in 5 minutes. I know people still have questions. So the schedule for the week, do we have it written down offhand? Oh, okay. Here's the schedule for the week. Tomorrow, and I reserve the right to change this because I may have screwed this up. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a lecture on Hephaestus. We talked about Hephaestus a lot. He's one of my favorites. He always gets pushed to the end. That's okay. On Wednesday, we're going to go into territory of talking about Heracles, because we haven't really spoken about Heracles yet. On Thursday, we're not going to get it in time. I wrote up a list. I forgot. You know what? Tell you what. Just watch these channels. We're going to have a schedule posted up. We're going to tell you all this stuff. So Hephaestus, Heracles. Maybe on Saturday we'll even do an all Q&A show because we're getting way more questions than we can actually possibly answer here. So we'll have like Monday through Friday we're going to have these just kind of like lectures. And then Saturday I'll just like sit there and just take your questions and stuff. So yeah. So if you're interested in that class, again, write at kidswordbookstores.com. We'll have a lot more specifics about that in the days to come. Send me your pictures of Hera or whomever to georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. And yeah, I think that's it. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're all having a great day, and I'll see you all tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. Bye-bye.